Hello, I'm Beverly Roberts, resident of Ward 5, Radnor Township, and I'm here again today to chat with John Nagle, the Ward 5 Commissioner, who's going to fill us in on the latest happenings around Radnor in general and in Ward 5 specifically. Good morning, John.
How are you today, Beth?
I'm good. Very well, thank you. So what do you think the biggest topic we want to talk about today is? Maybe the upcoming election?
Well, we have an upcoming election, and they're local races, so most folks, it's always bothered me, folks turn out in droves for presidential elections and not for local elections. And in fact, the local election is the one that affects your life so much more. I mean, your taxes are school board and taxes are township. And there's county races this year, so there's the other taxing authority. And you pay more to them than you do to Radnor Township, by the way.
Sure.
So you really ought to be out there. And it looks like a good year. Now, I'm not running again. I'm retiring from my seat. And there's a lady by the name of Maura Mulroney that's running in my place. And
is she the only candidate?
She's the only candidate. The Republican Party did not post a candidate. But I explained to her, that doesn't matter. She's still got to get out there and knock on doors and talk to people and get to be known. Sure.
Yeah, you're so right about the local elections being so important. And I don't know how we get people to really understand that. I think probably there's not enough effort being made to get people out there, because I know I'm there every time the polls open, because I've come to realize how my life is affected so much more by local politics.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I think our ward does a pretty good job. I try to make sure in the run-up to the election I talk about that and those items. Much like I always talk about buying local. And folks are like, why should I do that? Well, if you buy in a Radnor store in Radnor Township, those folks pay mercantile tax. And that keeps your tax rate down. In Radnor, more than 30% of our operating budget comes from mercantile tax. So if we were a bedroom community like some, that whole burden would be borne by your real estate taxes.
True. People don't often make that connection.
No.
They'll make the long trip to go to the big box store when they could get very often even better selections shopping locally.
And generally I found that, especially if you go to the Do It Best Hardware over in Wayne, those guys know the stock. They help you with issues. Spend as much time as it takes. And there's a surprising amount of stuff jammed in that store. But like I make a point of buying beer at actually in our ward, rather than going to a big superstore. And same with just about everything.
Yeah, and people come to know you. They know what you like,
right.
And you're served quickly.
And I also, as a commissioner, I talk to them about the township, so I get feedback. Generally, it's complaints about the mercantile tax.
So, speaking of the election, there's talk about new voting machines. How imminent is that, and what's been the conversation about it?
Well, it's interesting. I don't think I've ever had a conversation with another Politico about voting machines. It seems to be a much bigger issue with like the League of Women Voters, for example, and some of these voting organizations. The voting machines we use now, while they do have problems, I don't see the issues, mainly because they're not hooked up to the internet. So my understanding is the only problem they could have is in the programming, but that is tested out.
I know there's sometimes talk about not having a paper backup. Will
Right.
do you know about the new system that they're proposing, and how is that different?
Well, I did not. I was out of town, so I didn't get to the little show they
Yeah,
had.
so was I. I wanted to go.
And in your development, as Mary is very involved. She
Right.
went to that, and she's following it for the league. Most of these systems seem to be a step backwards. You have to, for example, you would fill out the ballot, either punch card type or actually write on it, and then you have go over to the next person, and then it has to be scanned. We saw in Florida back in the Gore Bush days what disasters can come
Hanging
with that.
chads, right?
Right. And also, I look back in our history, and at least in Delaware County, we didn't have paper. I mean, when you pulled the lever, a little mark was made on this big wide roll of paper that tabulated. But now we have the printout that comes out of the machine that gives you all the votes. So now I understand there are places that there are difficulties where they actually have tampered with the machines. So I'm not poo-pooing the effort. I'm just saying that I don't know that we have the issues.
Any idea about how soon this all might transpire?
They're shooting for the fall.
Oh, wow.
So, but that means we're going to be training all the poll workers.
Sure.
And I don't think a general election is really when you should be introducing new machines. You do it during the primary when the traffic's down and a little bit of time to work
That
with
makes
people.
sense.
I mean, the last couple general elections have been mob scenes. We did, last year, we voted like 85 percentile. I mean, it was packed all day. There were
I know.
half-hour lines.
And it was raining on some
And it
of
was
those
raining,
people.
yeah. Oh, it was a disaster.
But it was fun. It really
For
turned
some
out, yeah.
people, not for the people at the desk.
Oh, yeah, I know. So my next topic, or maybe we should go into the bond issue thing, because that's more closely related. Want to talk a little about the new bond issue?
Well, we have on the agenda to go to the market for bonds for about $7 million or so for capital projects. There's other bonds coming due and wrapping up such that we can borrow another 7 and would not have to increase taxes at all. The cost of that $7 million would be the same as you're paying today for the ones that are going to retire. We are having additional discussions about borrowing a little more, and we'll have to raise taxes. But the bond market right now, we're talking you can borrow money at about 1.5%.
Now, this isn't something that has to be voted on in the election, is it?
No, this gets voted on by the commissioners, though.
Okay.
Radnor historically has not done a good job with funding capital programs. Like most of the country, you hear all these stories about failing infrastructure. And for example, our sewer system is going to need a lot of money. And some bridges, they're our bridges, they're not state bridges. Then we have the stormwater issues that we have to fund. And we've been lucky in the time I've been in office, we've had some windfalls. So what we did is we used the windfall to fund capital. And that's worked out pretty well. And then we did have a bond issue for the library renovations and also for some parks and trails.
I can so relate to this because I live in a condominium complex, as you know.
Right.
And we have the same sort of issues with capital projects that we struggle to get funded, and we put things off, the least urgent, so that we can build up, because we don't want to have an assessment, but sometimes the time comes and we have to have an assessment in order to fund that. So you multiply that times 10, 20, 100 times, and then you get to the local level, the county level, and even the national level in our highway system.
We've developed this attitude in the country that raising taxes is a bad thing. Paying more taxes is a bad thing. The focus really should be on, in my opinion, efficiency.
And what do you get for the money?
What are you getting for the money? I mean, if you have big bureaucracies, that's no good. And every politician, every time people try to address that, it gets nowhere because they're only in office for 2 years, 4 years. And the bureaucrats are still there. But in Radnor, for example, we have streamlined government. We've reduced the number of employees. The services are still being provided. So if, costs go up, and you just can't eat that cost, just like businesses. You try not to raise prices, but sooner or later it gets to the point that you have to.
Well, anybody who has children, you have to buy them new shoes when the feet get bigger.
That's
you know, change precipitates new expenditures.
Yes.
It's as simple as that. And,
but again, I think
sometimes not that simple, I'm sure. But
no, and it's also the fact that, and I've always said this in our ward, that as long as we are spending your money properly, if necessary, I'll vote to raise taxes. And I think we are spending money properly. Radnor is a fairly wealthy community. The people have expectations of service. And in fact, it's really quite funny, I would say. When I've talked to folks, and I'll give you an example, 4 years, 5 years ago, the manager proposed outsourcing trash services. Now, this doesn't affect you because you have to pay for your trash service. So I was opposed to that, but I went around talking to folks. To a person, everyone said, raise my taxes. I like our guys. They give us personalized service. And they talk to friends who have to use, you know, an outside service and hear all the complaints. Like, those guys have to work fast because the dollar's the thing. So they dump a trash can and half of it goes on the street. They don't pick it up. They just keep right on moving. Whereas in Radnor, they're going to pick it up. And many years ago, I had an event where they picked up my trash, and one of the guys noticed that my door was open. So they called the police. Police came, checked the house, secured the house. You know, would you get that kind of service from a contractor?
Well, no,
I don't think so.
No, I don't think so either.
And other silly things. But that's the same with everything. The sewer system, which I was talking about, over the years, we've just put off taking care of sanitary sewers. And we are now having, almost every year in the past 5 years, we've had a failure, and it's required emergency repairs. Well,
like
emergency
pipe replacement?
Yeah.
Digging up the road?
Yeah. Digging up the road, or the one recently, late last year, was over on, do you know where Rawls is? If you go up Bryn Mawr Avenue past St. Aloysius, on the left side there's a little stream that comes under. That's Rawls Run. Well, there's a sewer that runs through there, and it broke. So the repairs under emergency conditions can cost 3 times more. I mean, right now we're all suffering through our streets being torn up by Pico or Aqua, right? Now they're doing it proactively. Let's do it before they fail. Government wouldn't do that. I mean, it's just a simple reality. So we have a plan in place. We just have to decide which plan we like, because there's a couple variations, but it's going to mean that your sewer rents are going up. Right now, we are not collecting enough just to cover basic expenses, let alone any kind of proactive repairs. So that's one area where we need to.
So sewer rents are a separate entity from regular.
Yeah, the system is considered to be self-funded, and under ideal conditions, it's entirely funded by the sewer rent, and we base it on your water usage.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Oh, I do remember that in the past.
Yeah.
I've seen sometimes the bills came together with the water usage, and I wondered then and asked the question, how is the sewer determined? And of course, it makes sense to connect it to the water usage.
And the problem with that is we have little control of our expenses because the bulk of our expenses are downstream of Radnor. They're the agencies that we go through to get to the treatment plant, and then the cost of the treatment plant, which we don't set those costs. Somebody else does.
Oh, I see. So we don't have a treatment plant in Radnor?
No, we have regional authorities. Ours is called Delaware County Regional Authority, although our sewage goes to the Philadelphia Southwest Treatment Plant.
Okay. I think we got that.
Enough about that.
Yeah. On the topic that I was about to go to before, you and I were chatting a little bit early about it. Let's talk a little bit about the prospective new high school starting time. And in fact, it's not just prospective, it's going to happen, right?
Well, because of my involvement with the League of Women Voters, I've been following that for quite some time. The League was one of the major proponents of that. And then in addition to that, I'm the liaison to the Board of Health from the Board of Commissioners. So they got involved, and they also recommend it to the school district to make that decision. The township really has nothing to do with it.
Oh.
But the Board of Health just advises, so they thought it was a good idea. The studies that have been presented, it's dramatic. And there's a few school districts that have done it already, and they've seen real change.
Now, this does not affect start times for middle school or elementary school?
I don't think so. I haven't followed the specifics of when it got passed by the school board. Just the bigger concept.
So this will be enacted come fall, come September.
That's my understanding.
Well, I'm sure.
And one of the biggest stumbling blocks was things like sports.
Oh, sure.
Right, because they're after school, and how do we, if another school isn't on the late start schedule, but they worked it all out. Huh. The superintendent is really a great guy. He's very proactive, and now I think Tredyffrin has passed it. They're going to do it.
Oh, wow. It may start to be a pattern.
Yeah, and
then the sports thing will become insignificant.
Well, I think it was really just a matter of how you move the kids around in the start time of the games.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fortunately, when they anticipate issues like that, it's easier to work them out ahead of time than to face it at the end.
Well, the amazing, now granted, I went to school a long time ago. We didn't start at dark 100, it was like 8:15 or 8:20. So I don't know when that moved, but it's interesting.
Yeah.
And who did it benefit? And were they making the school day longer so they could do more educating?
No, actually, they were probably making more time for all the activities. I don't know about you, but in my day, there weren't so many activities after school, so many different sports, music, dancing. Kids are all into these extracurricular things that they want to make time for, because then they still have to have time to go home, eat dinner, do the homework, and get to bed on time.
Well, and homework's a whole separate subject. There's a lot of concern about the amount of homework.
Oh, I've heard a lot about that.
So they're complex issues, really. The society's changed. You never hear these days, and I used to see this when I was on Parks Board. You never hear of kids just getting together and playing sports.
Yeah.
It's always got to be through an organization, and then you get parents involved, and then the kids never learn how to work issues out between each other, because the parent solves the problem. So.
And the money that changes hands here for these organized sports. Now I have a grandchild, and I'll tell you, I am flabbergasted at what my daughter spends for her to play soccer and lacrosse and whatever else comes down the pike.
Yep.
I mean, it's unbelievable.
True.
But I'm sure, it teaches them a lot. Team sports is a good thing. I'm certainly not downplaying it, but wow. So how about the Wawa in Wayne? You have that on your list, John. What's up with that?
That was voted on last week, and it was denied. So now we will go to court because Wawa will take us to court. And we'll see how it plays out. Delaware County, my experience, at least in the 10 years or so, well, let's say the 25 years I've been involved in Radnor, is every time we go to Delaware County, we lose. And then we have to take it to the next level. Sometimes we win, sometimes we lose at the higher levels.
So talk a little bit, though, about what the real issue is for those people who may not be totally up to speed.
The issues that people are concerned about are traffic, the fact that it's 24-hour. There's some concern about after school. A lot of the kids from the middle school and St. Catherine's, which is right there, will walk over across the street. There's a couple eateries and there's a Five Below and things like that. So there's concern about the safety of the kids. I personally believe every single one of those issues can be worked out. I think, and I counseled the folks over there to work with Wawa to solve those problems, because Wawa has quite a reputation of being a good neighbor. So work with Wawa on the design of the building. We don't want something that looks like a Wawa, right? We want something that maybe is Victorian, and they do that. Wawa's, I've seen pictures of some of their stores. The location of the pumps, the lighting especially is a big issue. Sound control. Where are the driveways? I mean, all of those things, if you worked with them, I think you get a reasonable solution. If, in this case, where it's going to court, you're going to be stuck with whatever gets decided.
Right.
And right now there's a gas station on the corner, and there's two gas stations and a car wash. And all three of them are dilapidated, run down. It would be an immense improvement. The folks that live behind there, well, you bought your home knowing that you were adjacent to a commercial district. So what did you think
was going to happen?
Yeah. 24 hours, the gas station right across the street is already a 24-hour gas station. The CVS is open 24 hours. So a lot of the issues, I think, are just that fear of the unknown and my backyard, that kind of thing. People were worried about cut-through traffic, and everybody's going to get off 476 to come down and get gas at the Wawa. Well, no, they're not. Yeah. My experience is we have a Wawa, right? Right up the street from me and you. Lunchtime, it's a mob scene. It's crazy. But those people aren't driving from the other side of Wayne to come to that Wawa to get their hoagie. No. They're all local. So that traffic is already there.
And it's manageable.
I think it is. So I'm sure now I'll have everybody on Midland Avenue hating me. But
well, it's a complex issue, and it doesn't sound like it's going to get resolved real soon. I wanted to spend a little time, because I find this really interesting that not many people maybe know about. I certainly didn't, was the whole Willows Park Preserve thing. I went online to look it up because you had it on your list to talk about, and I think it's an exciting project. I mean, very expensive, but it's going to really be an asset to the community.
Right, and the Willows was closed down for safety concerns, the condition of the building, things like that, 6, 7, 8 years ago. I don't remember which. We had a vendor lined up to come in. It was one of these wedding vendors. But they had problems with their financing, so the deal fell through. And then we had St. David's preschool who wanted to go in there. The neighbors objected to that, so that pulled out because the school was worried about finding a location. They didn't want to go through the inevitable lawsuits and everything. So now this group came forward and they said, look, we want to be able, we'll renovate the mansion. We want to operate it for the public. It'll be open to citizens of Radnor. 20, 25 times a year, they're going to have events like weddings, but they're limited to 150 people. And that's how they will pay for their electric and gas and all that. They asked, when we initially started, the township, the Board of Commissioners at that time, voted to commit $1.8 million to that project.
And then an anonymous donor came up with another million?
Came up with $1 million. So there were some machinations about the accounting and all that, and we finally got back to the point that they would do the inside of the building, basically, or the building, and the township would take care of any upgrades, repairs up to the edge of the building. So the township will be doing sanitary sewer, fire waters, storm water, and potable water. It's likely that the total for that will come into less than the 1.8, so we won't we'll end up not spending it all. They one of the big issues had to do with the term of the lease. Originally it was 10 years because we already signed a lease with them. That they fundraisers said that was problematic, that if you're going to get somebody to commit big bucks, they want to know that their name's going to be out there for a longer period of time.
Sure.
So we upped it to 25 years.
You know, I don't want to cut you short, John, but I think we're running a little short of time now. I just want to be sure to encourage anybody who's interested in finding out more about this project to go to willowsparkpreserve.com. You can find out a lot more information, including if you'd like to volunteer or like to contribute. And also, if you have questions or you would like to weigh in on any of the issues we discussed here, please go to www.ward5radnor@gmail.com and let us hear what your thoughts are, and maybe for future discussions we can weigh in on things that are of interest to you that we may not know about. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Thanks, John.
We'll do this again soon.